Well, we're seeing EVs grow so much in popularity right now. It's all about making sure that people are educated, having the resources that they need about an EV.
Electric vehicles, or EVs, are helping Alabamians go the distance. EVs are more powerful, more practical, and more cost-effective than you think. EVs are also driving our state's economic growth. Welcome to the Drive Electric Alabama podcast, where we plug you in to everything you need to know about EVs in the state of Alabama. This podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV incentive programs. To learn more about these programs, go to alabamapower.com/EV. I'm your host, Cedric Daniels, and EVs have been a big part of my work and personal life for decades. I'm the former Chief Strategy Officer for a Birmingham-based company called Streamline, involved with program management and consultation for clean transportation. Before that, I worked as the electric vehicle marketing manager at Alabama Power Company. Educational and very interesting is how I would describe this first episode. We've got two guests who I know and respect and admire. One is Kenneth Boswell, Director of Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs, and it's commonly called ADECA. And by the way, you're going to hear us talk about department names and organizations and acronyms. And I know a lot of us don't want to hear acronyms, but don't be alarmed because we're going to be explaining them along the way. And you can find all of the links to them on our show notes. So welcome, Director Boswell.
Happy to be here.
How are you today?
Doing great.
Oh, great. Great to hear that. First, Director Boswell, can you give us a high-level explanation of ADECA and what it's doing in the EV space here in Alabama?
Yes, it's a state agency that actually administers both federal and state dollars. And we work very closely with local elected officials as well as local leaders. And we do that through various ways. Our primary functions are to help with sewer, water infrastructure needs. We even help from the standpoint of law enforcement from that perspective. There's nothing about ADECA and its grant programs that we do not touch, right down from surplus to also Office of Water Resources. We now have a new mission with the EV electric charging stations that are being deployed throughout the state.
You cover a lot of bases. That keeps you and your team extremely busy, I'm sure, Director Boswell.
Absolutely. There's no grass that grows up under our feet. We're in a continuous and constant motion. As you're well aware, the state is growing from the standpoint of industry. That's the main primary focus for the governor, is to make sure that we not only support industry, attract industry, but also retain our industry partners.
So thank you, Director Boswell. I'll be back to you in just a second. Now, let me also say that ADECA plays a primary role in the statewide public education initiative called Drive Electric Alabama. And the initiative is dedicated to improving the state through the adoption of electric vehicles, or EVs, which you'll hear me refer to sometimes. You also have the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition, and that's commonly called ACFC, helping navigate all things EV, which brings us to our second guest, someone else who I know very well and respect and admire, Michael Staley, president of Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. I should also mention that Michael is the co-host of this podcast along with me. You'll hear him on episodes from time to time. Hey, Michael, thanks and welcome to the podcast as well.
Thank you, Cedric. It's great to be here. Great to be on this podcast.
Yeah, nice seeing you again. And Michael, if you can explain at a high level what ACFC is.
The Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition, we've been around for over 20 years now. I'm the second president. We focus on alternative transportation fuels. So that's fuels that are alternatives to petroleum. And we believe those fuels are important because they reduce our dependence on foreign petroleum, and we promote the use of domestically sourced fuels that will reduce transportation costs and emissions. That's good for communities, it's good for our environment, and it's good for the bottom line.
And you can also tell us about Drive Electric Alabama, please.
Okay, so let me tell you. So Drive Electric Alabama was launched by the state in 2021. Governor Ivey and Director Boswell and the legislative leadership. The idea of Drive Electric Alabama is to be a platform to educate about electric vehicles. You can go to driveelectricalabama.com, see a list of upcoming events, and connect with information. You can even connect with car dealers who want to sell EVs. And you will find that there's a lot of resources where you can get facts and you can get answers to questions you have. And that's the goal of the initiative, is to be a really honest broker of information. And you can ask questions, and it's people that you know, your neighbors are driving EVs. So why not go and talk to them about that experience and learn from what they're actually experiencing in Alabama?
So just like Director Boswell, and thank you for that, Michael, you also and your team very, very busy. And let me just say to the audience, I've traveled throughout the country, and both ADECA and ACFC are very admired for what they've accomplished. And so it's a privilege that you're representing and helping us here in Alabama. So I want to come back to you, Director Boswell. This is going to be like a tag team match, as you do at wrestling matches and that kind of thing. So when it comes to ADECA, Director Boswell, of course, we love our vehicles and our cars and our trucks here in Alabama. But why is driving electric an important topic for everyone in Alabama today?
Well, it's a manufacturing development aspect to us. One is the automotive industry creates jobs. Alabama is the 5th largest manufacturing state. We want to keep those jobs as well as grow those jobs. We want to make sure that the industry shifts to more EV, that the state does as well to be in a support role for manufacturers. As more EVs enter the road, we want Alabamians to be familiar with them and their benefits. We want those who choose an EV to be able to drive and recharge and do everything people do with a traditional combustible engine. And I might add that the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition has been a great partner from that aspect.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, when I think about the supporting the growth of electric vehicle adoption, all of the things that you just described are so important. Are there some other things which might be coming in the future that you think could continue to help us adopt electric vehicles in some kind of way?
A lot of our EV work has come as the automotive manufacturers, not only around the world, but especially those in the state that have made significant commitments to EV in the recent years. We want to, as a state, support those jobs and also make sure that it's possible for those to choose and drive EVs to be able to do it without range anxiety. That's very important to the state.
So great point, Director Boswell. Range anxiety is when someone who has an electric vehicle wants to go a certain distance, but they're not sure about the range and they don't want to be stranded or run out. So thanks to having charging stations along their way, then they can stop and replenish that energy and confidently make their destination.
That's true. Overview of our EV grant program. We started with state funds that was awarded and have been awarded so far to speak with the legislators to support them. Now we have the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure dollars that are coming in, otherwise known as NEVI, that we have $79 million that will be created and coming into the state over the next 5 years. And we're in the process of getting ready to get that deployed into the field. So we're just not putting emphasis on any one random place. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the state as a whole and addressing all of the EV advisory group.
So you're doing all of those things and really all of the other tasks that you talked about earlier, and that's going to really, really help us in Alabama grow the opportunities to use electric vehicles. So thank you, Director Boswell, so much. And just for the audience's information, we're going to have episodes that's going to be coming up focusing on funding later this season. So stay tuned for that next opportunity to dig a little deeper, and we'll talk in more depth. A lot of those things that Director Boswell is leading and is very, very involved in, we'll talk about those, and so that you'll understand all of the intricacies of those great opportunities which you have here for businesses and also other public agencies and organizations within Alabama. So let's talk about also the evolution of EVs and what it means to Alabama. And of course, Director Boswell, you used to be the mayor of Enterprise. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
After being in that role and considering your role now, what do you think city and county leaders are thinking when it comes to EVs?
Well, from an aspect of being a mayor and speaking from that point of view, we as a mayor always wanted to do everything that we could do to capture those tax dollars of the traveling public that is moving through your city. We want to make sure that they have the amenities to be able to stop, rest, take advantage of those things to do within our city limits, but most importantly, to take advantage of those tax dollars that are going to be generated when that person stops to charge or either fuel his combustible engine. So we want to mirror that as much as we possibly can. And a good example of that would be we have an attraction here in Montgomery called Whitewater. And you have I-65 coming through Montgomery. It's only located 1 mile off of I-65. So they're putting 8 fast charging stations there at this location. What does that do for Montgomery? It actually shows off what the amenities are there. They have a restaurant there. They can eat, enjoy the amenities that are around them, and learn more about Montgomery. So I know that's what I did when I was elected, and I think that's what elected officials are looking at now.
So a fantastic opportunity for economic development in those cities and counties. And Dr. Boswell, I'd like to also ask you a little bit more about the workforce development, because I heard you talk about it in relation to electric transportation, electric vehicles, to workforce development. It sounds like that resonates a lot with why this is a priority for you and the state of Alabama.
It is. It's all about taking advantage, being on the ground floor, the foundation, if you will. The EV industry is very new, and the opportunities that avail not only now, but in the near future and the distant future from the standpoint of creating jobs is phenomenal. And we want to make sure that we do everything to seize that opportunity and not overlook something, continuously plan, make sure that we have everything in place to support industry. But, I'll give you an example of that. Westwater Resources, a graphite project that was located in Coosa County to actually help support the manufacturing of batteries, the ingredients. But also you have Mercedes that opened up the battery plant there in Vance. We want to make sure that we do everything that we can to support and take care of industry from that aspect.
Director Boswell, you were talking about jobs in your first opening remarks. Can you tell us more about workforce development in the state of Alabama as it pertains to electric vehicles, please?
Yeah, there's 4 areas: promoting electrical training and workforce upskilling. We want to make sure that the automobile manufacturing workforce is ready. We want to make sure the maintenance workforce is ready. First responders are ready, as well as EV charging infrastructure and installation and maintenance of those items are ready.
Quick break here to say that Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power Company's Home Charging Rebate Program. You can get $500, that's $500 when you purchase and install a level 2 charger in your home. Now that's a 220 outlet, like if you have an electric dryer or electric stove, the big outlet that you plug into. If you want to know more, check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Again, that's alabamapower.com/EV. Okay, back to the show. Michael, now it's shifting back to you once more. Tell us about infrastructure, and I say infrastructure, I'm talking about the the charging of vehicles, the fast chargers, as they refer to, as people are going highways and byways, and that infrastructure planning and how it looks on the ground from the standpoint of Alabama Clean Fuel Coalition within Alabama as you support ADECA.
Cedric, you know this. People talk a lot and they say chargers are only going to be in the big cities and metropolitan areas and where there's a lot of EVs registered. And what we want people to know is a story like what's happening in Boology, Alabama, which is far from a big city or a metropolitan area. It's right on the Mississippi border. And Boology has a charging station that was funded by ADECA. Our records show us, we think there's about 5 EVs actually registered in that county, but you had like 120 people that stopped to charge. And, they spend money when they stop to charge. So Boology, Alabama, they're benefiting from that money that those people are spending. So we have not only manufacturers making EVs, but now we have a lot of people owning EVs in Alabama and then people driving through our state. So these charging stations are now much more important to communities. And as the number of EVs grows over time, that's going to be more important. And the communities and the businesses and the folks that have chargers now, they're figuring it out. Maybe they feel like they're on the first wave, but what they're really doing is they're becoming a charging destination. With Director Boswell's leadership, ADECA has been making EV charging infrastructure grants since 2020. The federal government's 2021 infrastructure law created another NEVI program, which Director Boswell talked about, and that's going to bring a lot of new opportunity for grants, but also it brings a new layer of federal regulations and rules that have to be followed. So another layer of education that's needed, make sure people do these projects properly and that they work for people when they show up. That reliability is the most important thing about the planning. You got to have reliable stations that are going to work, that are going to meet the need. And Director Boswell knows, and this is why he's directed us, establishing an EV advisory group is such a great practice of this EV advisory group, having a plan and following it too, so that you can direct people to the plan. You have applications for your grants and people can apply. It's a competitive process. We help by managing this EV advisory group and assisting with the development of the program. And this EV advisory group, I think, is really something Alabama is proud of and should be. Over 65 individuals representing 50 organizations. Every electric utility is represented. The state agencies from the governor's office to ALDOT to the Emergency Management Agency, Department of Agriculture, Tourism, Department of Labor, Finance, they all come to the table, and it includes EV owners, the League of Municipalities, so all the mayors, the Association of Counties, the automobile manufacturers, the auto dealers, the petroleum marketers, people who own gas stations that want to put chargers in. They're doing it because they want access to that percentage of drivers driving EVs. And so the overall goal of the planning process is to deploy reliable infrastructure managed and operated by entities that know what they're doing and have experts at their disposal they can call on when they need technical support to keep those things working.
Golly, Michael, that's a lot of great information and a lot of things that you're doing. And of course, Director Boswell as well and his team, which are going to be vital to us. And that leads me to the challenges. When I think about what you've said about Drive Electric Alabama and its mission for education and all of the many types of aspects which are important to consumers that we need to know and people as citizens of Alabama, but then businesses as well. What are the biggest challenges with trying to convey all of this information to all of those out there who are just listening today?
Well, Cedric, I think it's really important to answer that question and say the biggest challenge is a lack of information and a lack of knowledge. People in Alabama haven't always had opportunities to drive an EV or to see an EV or to see an EV charger. If you go to other states that were earlier adopters, there's infrastructure everywhere. One of the things that non-EV owners don't think about is that 95% of EV charging is either happening at home or at work. So it's rare, but still essential when people need to go out and charge at a public station. So public charging may become important for folks that can't charge at home or work, and they're traveling long distances outside the range of their EV. People need to learn about that and understand that an EV, especially the newer models coming out, can meet almost any need.
Both you and Director Boswell have talked about education and the role of ADECA and Drive Electric Alabama being key to the EV transition. So please share a couple of things that have been done to help educate the residents of Alabama.
We've seen this podcast being presented by Alabama Power. We've seen the EV Summit that was held, that was organized by the Automotive Manufacturers Association. We've seen EV owner chapters established in all corners of the state. For National Drive Electric Week, we had in this state 5-6 different groups of EV owners pull up and park for 4 or 5 hours in a group at an EV showcase where the public can interact with those drivers and learn about what it's like to own an EV from an actual EV owner who lives in Alabama. That is the best way to overcome that challenge, and that is what I'm so excited to be a part of.
All right, thank you. It's now time for a segment where we separate fact from fiction when it comes to EVs. This is brought to you by the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. Well, there's a common misconception out there that EVs are costly to maintain and repair. But the fact is, maintenance needs and cost of an EV are significantly lower compared to an internal combustion engine. Now think about this. There are roughly 20, that's right, just 20 moving parts in an electric motor. For an internal combustion engine, there are over 2,000 moving parts. There's a big difference. EVs are easier to maintain and fix, and there are no oil changes, ever. So Director Boswell and Michael, thank you so very much for your time today. Now, as we wrap up, can you give us a few takeaways to help us remember about the EV industry? So Director Boswell, I'll go to you first, and I'll probably come back to you one more time possibly, but I want to just ask you for those takeaways as you think about things that we definitely need to remember.
Well, we're seeing EVs grow so much in popularity right now. I go back to one of my first presentations when I was talking about EVs, and I asked for a raise of hands in the audience, and I was talking about 75, 100 people. I asked, how many people in this room believe that EVs are going to come to fruition? I had 2 hands. The next year, all the hands. So it's all about making sure that people are educated, having the resources that they need to make sure that they know about an EV. But also what we need to do as a state, as in my opinion, is make sure that we have the human resources made available to industry, to train them, to make sure that we have the workforce ready, not only to produce the EV, but also to maintain it, also to work on the charging stations and things of that nature. So I think those are the things that we need to look at in the immediate future, is to make sure that we have the workforce ready to be able to provide those items that I just spoke about.
Thank you. Michael, how about you? What are the takeaways that you'd like to leave us with?
So I drive a gas truck now. I drive a crew cab 4-door pickup truck. And I've done the math and determined that if I was to buy an electric truck the same size as my truck now, that instead of spending 21 cents a mile on gasoline, I would spend about 7 cents a mile on electricity if I charged that truck in my garage at home. That's a huge savings on fuel cost alone. And then when you consider the other savings of no more oil changes, no costly transmission repairs, There's simply fewer parts on an EV than there are on a combustible engine. Over time, you're going to save money. So when I go to purchase a new vehicle, or when anyone listening goes to purchase a new vehicle, you should really look at your electric options and see how that compares, not only from cost, but also EVs are fun to drive. The performance is far above what people expect it to be.
Fabulous. Director Boswell, one last question for you. Within the Southeast states, a lot of people are moving across those areas doing business as well as having entertainment and vacationing. So how important is it for Alabama to also embrace the EV technologies and infrastructure when it comes to our neighboring states?
Well, we always want to take advantage of the federal dollars that are coming into the state, but also the state dollars. We want to make sure that we put the infrastructure in place that whomever it is, whether it be the traveling public from state to state or from those that are just choosing to buy an EV and use them from going to work to picking up children from school, we want to make sure that they have the advantages and the opportunities that other states have. We don't want to be left behind. So we want to make sure that we take full advantage of those federal dollars and make them stretch just as far as we can. The other thing that I would say is that we're seeing an enormous amount of interest from the standpoint of just communities. They don't want to be left behind either. They want to make sure that they have the infrastructure in place to make sure that they capture those tax dollars, show off their communities like I spoke about earlier, and make sure that their communities stay as competitive as the state wants to be competitive in that area. We want to make sure that we stay focused and make sure that industry knows that we're doing everything to support them in their efforts and the direction that they're going in the manufacturing of EVs.
A sincere thank you so much, Michael and Director Boswell. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the EV industry in Alabama. And thanks to your efforts and your organization's efforts, Alabama is going to be in great shape. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how the transition to EVs is more accessible to folks in Alabama through federal and state grants as well as utility incentives. My co-host, Michael Staley, will be speaking with Houston Smith, Vice President of Governmental Affairs for Alabama Power Company, and he's also Chairperson of Energy Institute of Alabama, or commonly referred to as EIA. And he'll be joined by Blake Hartwick. She's Executive Director of the same EIA. Stay tuned, and we hope to see you then. The Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV programs, as well as the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. The series is co-hosted by me, Cedric Daniels, and Michael Staley. And the podcast is produced by Ingredient. For more information, you can always check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Thanks for listening.